Appliqué is one of the most versatile, interesting and creative forms of patchwork. I love using appliqué in the things that I design and make, whether that's in the form of cute tiny houses or sunbonnet zoos, or whether I am just appliquing some hexagon flowers, teeny tiny ones onto tape measures and pincushions, or larger ones onto baskets. I really love all of the different forms that appliqué can take. I also love that you can create unique designs, and I've used it a lot in my series of Flower of the Month mini quilts. But often people tell me that they find appliqué to be tricky, and often people are confused about which method to use because there are lots of different ways to do appliqué. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you my 4 favourite methods of appliqué. I will share as many tips and tricks as I can along the way, and the very last method that I'm going to share is something that's really new to me, but I think it's excellent. It could possibly be the best method of appliqué ever. It's a real game changer, so make sure you watch to the end to see that. And also let me know your thoughts in the comments. Which of these techniques have you tried? Which ones haven't you tried? Which ones do you like? I want to hear it all. Now, before we get into the appliqué techniques, I would just like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that is June's Journey. I started playing June's Journey well over a year ago now. I was actually going through a bit of a difficult time personally, and I found June's Journey to be the perfect distraction to the worries that I had going on in my mind. It was a great bit of escapism and really helped me to unwind and relax. June's Journey is a fantastic hidden object mystery game set in the 1920s, so it really has this vintage vibe. You do feel like you're going back in time. We follow the main character, June, as she pieces together the clues to try to solve the mystery behind her sister's murder. So there is a real storytelling element to the game, which I absolutely love. We work our way through a series of hidden object scenes, and these scenes are beautifully drawn with so much detail in them. It's so fun to find all of the hidden objects, and I really love that sense of progression of working my way through the scenes and trying to get all of the objects as quickly as possible. In addition to that, you're given an island to decorate, so as you collect coins you can buy items and you can decorate your island. I've put a lot of flowers and trees on mine, but it's so fun to be creative with this. There are also seasonal games to play and different seasonal objects to collect, and I really enjoy those as well. There's always something interesting and new in the game, which is just so much fun. If you'd like to play June's Journey too, you can download it for free by using the link in the description box or by scanning the QR code on the screen. June's Journey works on iOS and Android mobile devices as well as PC. Thank you so much to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. So the first method of appliqué that we're going to look at is the traditional old school method of needle turn appliqué, which is a really tried and true method that has been used for many years. I love needle turn appliqué. I love the look of it. It can be a little bit tricky and there are different things that you can do to make it a bit easier, but it is a really great method if you can master it. I used it for my bluebell block. I used it in the stem and to stitch the flowers down as well, and I also used it in this tulip block that I made for the leaves and for the petals. Because this fabric is a bit thin, you can actually see the seam allowance through it, but other than that, I think it's a really great method. So the first thing you need to do is cut out your templates or your appliqué shapes for whatever design that you are going to stitch, and then what I like to do is place them on the right side of my fabric, and I usually use a little spot of Soline glue, just a tiny dot just to secure it in place, and then I cut around the shape with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to start with the stem. So what I've done is I have put my paper piece onto the right side of the fabric, and I think something that really helps is to then draw around it with an air or heat erasable pen. So this is an air erasable pen, because then you can take the paper off. You might want to pin it, but I'm just going to tack it with the glue. It's just how I do things these days, and I'm just lining up the paper shape the best I can with the line I've drawn on my fabric. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that, so I'm going to take my paper off that now. I don't need that on. And then as for all of the methods I'm talking about today, I like to use a fine needle, so either an appliqué needle or a milliner's needle, and a fine thread, so for example a Wonderfill Deco Bob or a Wonderfill Invisifill. So all I've done is fold the seam allowance under on the stitching line, up to the stitching line that I drew, and then I'm bringing the thread up on that line, and then I'm going back into the backing fabric and then just bringing my needle just up ever so slightly onto the edge of the piece that I'm stitching down. I'm just going to work in this way, just catching the edge of the fabric as I go down. The stems are nice and easy to do because they're quite straight. Just catching the edge. So I'm going to continue in this way. I'm going to stitch all the way down, then when I get to the bottom I'm going to fold that raw edge up, stitch along there, and then fold the other side under as well. If there are any curves in the shape, I make sure to snip into them, as this will really help me to turn the seam allowance under when I come to stitching. It can be a bit hard to get smooth curves when you're doing this technique, which is why having the paper on top for your design, something to push against, really does help. And you can sort of finger press as well to put the seam allowance under for those tight spots. I find that to be really useful as well. And a little dab of Soline glue just to hold things in place is always useful. Another thing that you can do is you could put your paper template on the wrong side of the fabric, and you could use an iron or finger press the seam allowance around the shape. Then it's already partly turned under, and then you can stitch it in place. If you're doing curve shapes, or for example something like this stem, then it's a good idea, if you've got a large enough piece of fabric, to put your to cut your stem out across the grain, because that will give the fabric more stretch, and it will really help you when you need to create those curves with your applique. And it's good to do that for things like petals as well. I really enjoy it. I think it's a really nice way to stitch, but there are 3 more methods in this video, so keep watching. Perhaps you'll like one of the other ones even better. So probably the easiest method of applique that there is out of all of the ones we're talking about today is method number 2, and that is the raw edge applique method. Now, when I'm doing raw edge, there are lots of different ways you can do it, but I like to use a product called Wonderweb, and I've got it on a big roll, but you can buy it in smaller amounts. So what Wonderweb is a fusible adhesive that can fuse 2 pieces of fabric together. So when you get it off the roll, you've got one side that's got the adhesive on it. It doesn't feel sticky, it just feels a little bit rough. And then you've got another side which is like a greaseproof paper. And what you do is, on the wrong side of your fabric, you place the adhesive side down, and then with an iron you press the greaseproof paper side, and that sticks the Wonderweb to your fabric. Like so. So here's a piece of Liberty fabric, and you can see it's got the Wonderweb stuck on the back. Now what you can do is you can draw your design on here, and then you can get all of your pieces, and then you need to lay them out on your backing fabric, peel off this paper layer, which is like a greaseproof paper, peel that away, place everything where you want it to be, and then fuse it with an iron. So put an iron over the top of it, hold it on for a few seconds, and then everything will be secure to your backing fabric. And it's really as simple as that. I think it's a really great method. I've used it a lot in my Flower of the Month designs. So when the petals were really, really small, I opted for this method because it's much easier than any of the other methods I'm mentioning today for small pieces, so I find it to be really great for that. A top tip is to already trace the outline of your design onto your backing fabric, which will make it much easier to position all of your petals in place, or whatever the design is, all of the pieces in place, if you've got it already traced onto your backing fabric. It's entirely up to you how you want to stitch it down. You can stitch around the edge of the shapes, you can do it with machine or by hand, but what I've tended to do a lot for this method, and in my Flower of the Month designs I did this many times, was to stitch the shapes in place using embroidery stitches, decorative stitches. So sometimes just a big stitch down the middle of a petal or a leaf is enough to hold it in place. So you can see I've done the method here. This is one of the Whimsical Windows designs, and I've added some embroidery stitches just to hold everything in place. But it also adds a really nice extra bit of texture when you mix embroidery and applique together. So I really like that combination, and I think it works really well. So this is a really simple and straightforward method. There are a couple of drawbacks. If you do happen to get the adhesive side of the bond web onto your iron, it can be a bit disastrous. Yeah, that's happened to me, so do take care with that to double check you've got it the right way around. But I do find it to be a really great method, especially for small petals and things like that. So let me know what you think. Have you tried this method and do you like it? So the third method of applique is probably the one that I have used the most and has long been my favourite, and that is the Hexiform method of applique. So if you don't know what Hexiform is handmade actually here in the UK by a company called Ashmead Designs. I'm not sponsored by them, I never have been, I just really love their product. And Hexiform is actually an alternative to paper for English paper piecing, and it comes in a whole variety of shapes and sizes. This is a packet of squares, but you can get it in hexagons of all sizes and anything you want really. And I love using it for English paper piecing, so here's just a little sample I have here where I've used the Hexiform. And when you use paper in English paper piecing, you need to remove it, but when you use Hexiform you leave it in because it is a fabric and it acts like a fabric, and it adds nice stability, but also your piece is nice and soft and squishy. Now I've used it a lot for English paper piecing, but I started using it for applique because you can actually buy Hexiform in sheets, so you can cut it to any shape and size that you like. And so I've experimented a lot with this. It's really a technique I've sort of developed myself. I've never ever seen anyone else use it in this way, and I find it to be a really great method for applique. I've used it a lot in my designs, so I used it in my Flower of the Month designs, and you can see here I've used Hexiform for the rose in the middle, and it adds a nice raised texture, especially where I've layered the pieces up. There's a real three-dimensional aspect to it. I've also used it a lot in my Whimsical Windows designs, and it's a really great example of its use is this washing line, because all of the items of clothing are made using the Hexiform method, and it really adds a nice dimension to it. What you need to do is to cut out your applique design from paper and then use those templates to cut the shapes out from the Hexiform. Once you've got your shapes cut out, you can then place them fuzzy side down onto your fabric and then cut your fabric out around the Hexiform shape, but very importantly leaving at least 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. A top tip that I can give you for if you are working with curved shapes such as the dress or the trousers or the t-shirt is to snip into those curves quite closely, and that will really help when you fold the fabric around the shape, because it will really help it to bend and curve to mould the shape of the Hexiform. And then after doing that, I use a Sewline glue pen to baste the shape, just like you would baste a shape for English paper piecing. So I just run the glue a fraction of the way away from the edge of the Hexiform and then fold the fabric over and you create a basted shape which is then ready to applique. I think it's a really great technique. I love the three-dimensional quality that it gives, and it's just a really easy and simple way to create your applique design, and I get really nice results with it. I find it's quite easy to get curves, and it's quite a neat method. I also used it when I made this quilt with these flowers. Now, I didn't cut them out myself. The hex petal flowers are a shape that you can buy from Ashmead Designs already, and I stitched them together just like you would with any English paper piecing shapes, and then appliqued them to the quilt, and it's such a happy, cheerful quilt, this one. So yeah, a really nice example of what the Hexiform is like when you applique it to something. And of course it washes really well. You can treat it just like you would any other fabric, and I've never had a problem with it when I've put it in the wash. Do bear in mind that you will need to quilt your pieces because they could become dislodged. I haven't had a problem with small pieces like this, but if you had a lot of pieces you might want some quilting stitches through them. I don't tend to wash my decorative pieces though, so I think pieces like this which are stitched all the way around and are quite small are unlikely to become dislodged, but I wouldn't wash this anyway. So that's the Hexiform method that I use quite often in my designs. Now it's time to move on to the final method, which is method number 4, the Wonderfill method. So method number 4 is a really new to me method, something that I've only just tried out recently, but I'm really enjoying it, and I do think that this is a bit of a game changer and could possibly be the best method of applique ever. So it's a method using a product called Instant Appliqué, which is made by Wonderfill. Now, I'm not sponsored by Wonderfill. I've never been sponsored by Wonderfill. I do sell their threads because I absolutely love their threads and I use them all the time. And I do have some of this in my shop now because, again, it's a product that I really love. And I only ever sell things that I really, really love. So it says on the packet that say goodbye to messy glues, adhesive sprays and left-in permanent bonding agents with Instant Appliqué. It's a light double-sided adhesive, and that means that you are crafting iron-free, so you don't need an iron with this at all. You can use it in conjunction with their Appliqué transfer sheet. Now, I recently tried this out using a Beatrix Potter design of the Tailor of Gloucester, and I documented all of this over on Patreon. But essentially what I did was I took the applique design of the Tailor of Gloucester Little Mouse and I cut it out of the applique transfer sheet, so I had all my shapes ready. This is an adhesive stabilizer, if you like. It has a backing sheet on it because it's sticky on both sides. So you have a sticky side and then you have the sheet that has the backing sheet on it. And what you do is you place your design on the sticky side and then cut out your shape. You can then place it onto your fabric and cut your fabric out with 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you cut out your shapes, cut into those curves. If you've got curved petal pieces, it's really good to cut them on an angle across the grain because that means your fabric will stretch and you can really get nicer curves if you cut your pieces across the grain. So that's something to bear in mind. And just like you would baste your shape using the Hexiform method that I mentioned previously, you can baste your shape with this, but you don't need a glue pen because the Instant Appliqué has adhesive on it and it is quite sticky. One of the drawbacks is that you do get sticky fingers, but you get that anyway when you're using the Soline glue pen, so it didn't bother me at all. It washes away really easily. And then you're ready to place them onto your fabric and it will stick in place because it has adhesive on the back. And then you can stitch it in place just as we have for all of the other methods. Now, something that is really special about the Instant Appliqué is it isn't left in. Once you have completed your piece and stitched it all together, you just need to rinse it under warm water and this stabilizer will completely dissolve and will no longer be within the piece. so you don't have to worry about how it will wash because it will completely wash away. What that leaves you with is a really different piece compared to, say, the Hexiform one. With the Hexiform one, you've got lots of texture and it's quite puffy, but you get a more flat piece when you have washed away the Instant Appliqué, and it has more of a feel like a traditional needle turn applique piece. So I think it's a really great method. It is basically a modern method of needle turn applique if you use it in this way. Of course, you can use it with a sewing machine and there are lots of different ways you can use it. But if you use it in this way, it is making, in my opinion, the needle turn applique even easier, which is something that I really love because I do love the look of traditional needle turn applique when it is hand stitched. Of course, all of these methods that I've mentioned today, you can use a machine to stitch them down, but we mostly talk about hand sewing on this channel, which is why I've really focused on that aspect of it. But you can machine stitch with all of these methods. That's absolutely no problem. So what do you think of the 4 methods? Which one is your favourite? Which ones have you tried? Do let me know, and yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and do remember to download June's Journey. It's such a fun game and I know you'll really enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.